The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, Baton Rouge. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought, Baton Rouge Community Radio's only live call-in show on 96.9 FM in Baton Rouge. Good evening, everyone. As I said, this is a live call-in show. You're welcome to call in and share your thoughts and questions. The only rule is you be respectful about it, and, well, just that. The phone number here is 343-9927 if you'd like to call in. We do have the phones working tonight. 343-9927. And if you're outside the calling area live streaming on WHYR.org, simply dial the area code and you can call in there. Okay, tonight's topic, and we have a guest in the studio to lend his expertise, but tonight's topic is, what will a post-racial society look like? And with us tonight are Kendall Losey, one of my regular co-hosts.
Hello.
And hello, Kendall. And our special guest, Bobby Thompson, who has been involved with the Louisiana Dialogue on Race for 26 years, and he's taught me a lot about race relations. In fact, the Dialogue on Race taught me at 58 years old something shocking and very new to me, and I continue to learn just how little I actually know. Good evening, Bobby.
Good evening, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. And I also, as I understand it, you have someone in your ancestry that you know was a slave. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. My great-grandfather, I was just talking about that. I happened to be at a funeral at one of my uncles, and I was sitting at our family gravesite in Marksville, Louisiana, actually Mansour, Louisiana. And I happened to look down, and I saw that I was sitting on John Thompson's grave, my great-grandfather. And I noticed that his date of birth was 1838, which would have made him in his 30s by the time emancipation came about.
Right.
So the remarkable thing about that is that within a generation, he had gotten all of his kids educated and on the way to being pretty well prosperous. And I think the difference was that he owned land.
Yeah. Did you ever research into how, as to how he got that, or?
I've looked into it, and somehow I think that came with the emancipation.
Cool.
I think he was given 100 acres. We've heard of the 100 acres and a mule.
Yeah.
Well, he got the 100 acres. I don't know about the mule.
Well, hey, if you got land to live on, that's a big step, especially.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into my point of view about what would post-racial America look like.
But first define what a post-racial America is. What's post-racial?
Post-racial would be a period where there is a lack of racism, and I say racism, not racial prejudice. There seems to be a confusion where we use racial prejudice and racism synonymously, and that's not the case. Racial prejudice is what you like and don't like. We all have prejudice.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. Racism is something different altogether. It's a power structure, and so when we talk about racism, it has have the power to enforce your prejudice, so to speak.
Yes, and as I learned, one of the biggest recent revelations concerning race relations in America that I've learned or had was the idea of white privilege. I mean, those prejudices are built in to all of our institutions simply because that's the way we've always done it.
Yes, but that's not the way we've always done it.
Really?
Whiteness wasn't always whiteness.
Oh.
Okay. Race wasn't always race. If you go back to the 17th century, you'll find that race was defined by your nationality. Races were French, English, Spanish.
Sure. Right.
It wasn't until we get to the colonies that you find a white race. And that only came about after several rebellions. Bacon's rebellion was one in Virginia, where people of different quote unquote races came together to demand better conditions. Some were white indentureds, some were free blacks, some were indentured blacks, some were slaves. And they rebelled against the landowner.
Let me guess, there was a little bit of divide and conquer involved in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And that's really what racism is about. It is about the stratification of power and wealth.
Yeah.
Or labor and wealth, excuse me.
Yeah, and that's an old battle right there. It's just a different manifestation of it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, when you first suggested this topic a ways back, I acknowledged right away that it was going to be a toughie for this old white guy, but I gave it some thought. Now, how would you like to approach this? I have all the ideas that I could come up with, in thinking about this issue of what a post-racial society would look like. But would you like me to list mine first and talk about them, or do you want to come up with yours?
You can go ahead and
just promise you don't.
I'm
Promise you won't laugh.
not going to shoot you down.
Oh no! If I'm wrong on anything,
we'll just compare.
Yeah, but I expect that I'll probably learn something new tonight too, and I'm cool with that. Okay, let's see. The obvious ones: equality in employment. Okay, no, race would not be. I mean, really, race would not be even considered when qualifications in education. Equality in housing. I have personal experience with the code words that are used by realtors and things like that. Equality before the law. And you and I have both read recently the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. It was the Equal Justice Institute that he founded in Alabama, was it?
That's okay.
And I was surprised to see how recently, I guess I shouldn't be. Atrocities against young black men or black men in general have been occurring, lately too. It's just, it's kind of colored in the police behavior, but it's the same thing.
The spotlight's been shown.
Yes, the spotlight has been shown. But equality in law, equality in finances, and just general equality in economic opportunities. I guess I boiled it down to non-whites would be viewed as just people, not a single entity or a stereotype. And that's actually what I learned. That was one of the things that I am privileged with as a white person in this country is when I speak, it's just me. When they look at me and I say something stupid, they think, hey, that guy's stupid. They don't think white people are stupid. But a black person speaking his mind or her mind, they have to be conscious of the fact that all their people that are of the same color skin are going to be judged by their opinion. That's a lot of pressure to carry.
Absolutely. And I think you're right on target. As far as what it looks like, it's very simple. It's what we call our creed. It's liberty and justice for all is what it comes down to. But the fact is that we are a democratic republic with a capitalistic economic system. And so what I've come to see is that what post-racial America would look like would be a paradigm shift in our economic structure from one of exploitation to one of community building, or what I would call a patriotic economy, to where the profit line and the public good would intersect. One thing that brought my attention to this is that the past in February, Black History, we were talking about Rosa Parks. And I realized that most people think, what Rosa Parks did was allow black people to sit on the bus anywhere they want. We very seldom think about the fact that it opened up people of color to benefit from the economic structure of that bus system. They hired black bus drivers, black mechanics, administrators, and so it allowed that community to participate in the economy of that bus company.
How? Do you mind if I ask how? I'm kind of getting off subject, but I was not aware of that. Surprise. But what were the dynamics involved in that? I mean, how did it just transpire?
Well, as Jim Crow began to fade away, we had the bus boycott in Montgomery, and it wasn't the altruism or the racial enlightenment of the powers that be. It was the economic pressure that the boycott brought on that system. So once that came about, and the Jim Crow laws had to be struck down, it opened it up so that it opened up the employment of those people within the bus company.
Okay.
And let me add one other thing. It's interesting that just recently our CEO of our bus company was lamenting the fact that we have no white bus drivers, which deters white customers from using the bus system. And he was kind of called down on that. But if you look at the history, when I was a kid, all the bus drivers were white. And when integration came, they all left. And almost overnight, the bus drivers went from white to black. And I can even remember back in, I want to say, 1980 to 1981 was the last time there was a white bus driver in the bus system.
Interesting. Now, the head of the bus system, is he black or white?
He's white.
Interesting. And they wouldn't even let him get away with that, huh?
No, he was called out for that.
How about that? You're listening to A Pause for Thought. We're discussing what a post-racial society will look like with Bobby Thompson as our guest and Kendall Losey as my co-host. Feel free to call in, 343-9927, 343-9927. Bobby, do you have a follow-up, or can I go ahead?
Let me.
It's your show, man.
Clarify one thing. There was one myth that seems to be is that the economic effects of our exploitative economy only affects African Americans. It's almost like whites go untouched by racism, but that's not true. If you look at the history, any time any labor group moved for better conditions, or better treatment, or better pay, I don't care what color they were, they got treated the same. All you have to do is look at our history of the Lode-Low massacre in Colorado, the Cold Wars in Virginia and West Virginia and Pennsylvania. The interesting thing about the Cold Wars were even though the mine owners did their best to keep the races separated, one strange thing, once you were in the coal mines, everybody's
black. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, you can't see anything. One thing I forgot to mention, too, in my list of things, actually, I pulled it out and made a sentence out of it, and I talked to you about this a little bit in the beginning. Another thing that I think we'd see in a post-racial society is that black Americans, or non-whites, but particularly blacks, would be able to trust the medical system.
This is true.
And I was not aware of that at all. And here's another new thing I've learned recently, but I have a black woman I work with, and I talk with her a lot about these issues because, she knows that I'm at least not a jerk. I may be ignorant in a lot of ways, but, but she told me about medical apartheid. It was written by Harriet A. Washington, and it's a well-researched book, but she went way back to the 17th century and said that way back then, non-whites, and particularly Africans, and then African Americans, were used as either unwittingly or unwillingly as research dummies for doctors. And they would write about it in their records, saying, we had this Negro, and we did this, and this to her. She had to be restrained, of course, that kind of thing. And it was totally matter of fact. And she said it exists today. So you don't know when you go in if you're going to get the best as the white guy that just walked out, or anything else.
That's true. What can I say about that? We always have to keep in mind that our country came into being declaring liberty and justice for all. And in order to maintain a slave economy with those kind of values, I mean, values to die for,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
To hold on to those values and still keep a population enslaved. And here's another myth. Whites weren't that far from slavery. Poor whites, working class whites were not that far from slavery. And if you look at the history, they were given just enough to be able to say, I may be getting the dirty end of the stick, but at least I'm white.
Yeah.
And it's what W.E. Du Bois called the wage of whiteness, is that they were told, or they were convinced that had some value. And in reality, they ended up empty-handed. And again, I point to those areas in which white workers were trying for better wages and better conditions, and they were massacred.
Yeah, well, it goes back to, like you said earlier, originally it was the oldest conflict in humanity, and that's the wealthy trying to keep what they've got and deny it to everybody else.
Now, I don't want to sound like I'm talking about, what's that, class wars?
Oh,
Okay,
no.
Okay. But we must understand that racism really came about to maintain the power and wealth in the hands of the few. If you look at slavery, at the height of slavery, what percentage of Americans would you think owned slaves at the height of slavery?
Maybe 5.
I wouldn't want to guess, but it'd be low.
It's pretty low. It's less than 2%.
Wow.
It's like I've heard anywhere from 1.4 to 1.5% of the population of the whole country owned slaves.
Yeah.
When you look at the South, it was 6% or less than 10% owned slaves. So how did the South, under Jeff Davis, who was a rich white planter,
Yep.
get what would that be, 94% of the population to go to war and risk their lives and property and everything to maintain the wealth of the 6%? That's
Well,
interesting.
effective propaganda, and you and I both know that works well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So back to your question about the medical apartheid. When we became a nation, there was this thing where Thomas Jefferson was supposedly to say, I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that African Americans or African slaves at the time are inferior to whites, but it'll take science to determine if that's true or not.
Right.
So in essence, what he did was sent the medical or the scientific community in search of what is the differences between whites and blacks, and what is it that make. So black people became the most studied group in America. I mean, they talk about the black foot, the black arm, the black hand. Jesse Owens was said to have this extra muscle
Yeah.
that made him so fast. Before then, we were considered so inferior that they didn't think that we would survive.
That's what I picked up on that in this book, Medical Apartheid. It's like back when they were saying that blacks weren't human, or they were less human than whites, so to speak, they still were human enough to do experiments on to treat white people.
That's true. That's
And
true.
but getting back to what you're saying before, not wanting to sound like you're doing the class war thing. Basically, Jesus Christ was up against the same thing, and I'm not pulling a religious thing here on anybody, but he was killed because he was threatening the status quo. There were both the Romans who worried about the poor rabble getting roused up and causing problems. There were the Pharisees, who were the established religious leaders of the time, and they wanted to protect their game. And so they say, hey, we got to get rid of this guy. But, and that's the same old story. That was 2,000 years ago.
And it's
Well-
incredible how that keeps being passed along
Yeah.
as the days go on.
It
Sure.
keeps on going, yeah.
Sure. And do you remember what Martin Luther King was working on when he was murdered?
Well, the Vietnam War, I think, was where he branched off to and increased his enemies there.
Do you know what project he was working on?
No, I'll recognize it when you say it.
Anybody?
Was he working to improve the labor rights of the poor?
How about the Poor People's March?
That's right. Yep.
Ah.
There you go. I remember that. The Poor People's March. Yeah. Hit me
Poor
with a
People's-
cliche and I'll remember it. Yeah, cliche. But yeah.
The Poor People's
Little
March
title.
wasn't too far away when he was murdered. They
Yes.
were organizing it, and it was not a black march. It was a
Ooh.
totally integrated march. Does anybody remember what happened to the march? Because it did happen. After he was killed, Abernathy went ahead with the march.
Tell us. I don't.
Well,
They don't tell us this.
Yeah, we didn't. No.
Well, I would suggest that everybody listening to this should look this up. But poor people did march, and they camped out on the mall and were determined to stay there until the government gave them some kind of relief or some kind of efforts would be made to lift the plight of the poor. And I can't remember exactly how long they were out there, but eventually the government moved in with bulldozers and moved them out. And
Like they did with the World War I bonus vets.
Exactly.
Under it was Wilson, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Or Hoover? I think it might have been Herbert Hoover.
Might have been. I have
But yeah, he called in General Patton and Eisenhower actually, and they bulldozed the veterans' villages and ran them off. And that was all the same thing. It's like, well, we can't have this. You know. Interesting, but yeah.
So again, it goes back to even the Bacon's Rebellion, where it woke white people up to the fact, or not. I'm going to change that. It woke up the rich and the powerful to the fact that if the 80% who are the working and the working poor got together and demanded better, then they would have to give up some of their wealth or some of their profit. So the best way to do that would be to divide it up and get the whites to understand that they were better, or like Tim Wise would say, all of a sudden you're on our team now. You may be on the bench, you may never get into the game, but at least you're white. And
Yep.
that's what I want you to focus on.
Okay. And how would we achieve that?
Again, it's going to take a paradigm shift of consciousness and us looking at our economic structure. We're not far from a slave economy now. It's still an exploitative economy. There's a commercial going on right now by Pat Boone, surprisingly enough, who got his popularity by imitating or covering music by Little Richard and other black
okay.
artists. He's promoting wealthy people to pull their money out of America and put it into a Swiss bank. And so he's the spokesperson for a Swiss bank. And he's using a fear tactic by promoting books such as I've Seen the Future and It Looks Like Baltimore. Now,
And he says something like, and it's like the evils of the progressive economy, you know, and the progressive dream is a nightmare for all Americans or something like that.
Yes. We're all going to be unemployed and everything else, rather than being employed and being paid peanuts, right? You know, rather
right.
than working our fingers to the bone. And of course, I'm not in that group, fortunately, but
Right.
the majority of Americans are. You know, they work very hard and hardly get by, and they have no security at all.
And what we need to understand is the fact that I'm sorry, I lost my
Yeah, it happens to me all the time. But happens to me on the air too. But yeah, I think about that too, and I guess the only pragmatic way. I mean, do you think passing laws could solve the problem? Do you think we can pass laws that would finally establish equality?
I think we have laws on the books. I think our tax structure. If we look at what has been done to the tax structure since, say, Eisenhower, which has given tax breaks to the wealthy while the middle class and the rest of us end up paying our fair share. the wealthy get away with paying less than their fair share. So really it comes down to how much do you really love this country and how much are you willing to invest in it? This is what it really comes down to.
Right, and we pretty much know the answer to that for a lot of those people, right?
Exactly. Oh, what I was going to say is that one thing I realized is that the American worker has pride in their work. They have pride in the fact that I've worked for everything I've gotten. But the rich and the powerful has taken advantage of that and used it against the American worker. I heard a young woman talking about working in the coal mines and generations of coal miner and how proud she was that she worked for everything that she got. But she should have gotten more.
I have to agree.
She should have gotten more.
And here again, I don't lump myself into that because I'm paid adequately, but still, most people. I mean, I've been told that I'm in like the upper 25% of Americans, as far as wealth, and I'm like, geez, I never thought myself rich. That means there are a lot of people who are hurting.
Mm-hmm. The minimum wage should be a living wage.
Yeah.
It should be a living wage. And we talk about national security, we talk about crime, we talk about a lot of different things, but if most Americans felt like they were a part of this society, that they had promise and hope for them and their families, I think we would be a lot more secure. We would have a lot less crime.
Yeah, no, I go along with that, Bobby. The whole country would be stronger if everybody felt that they had a stake in the game. Yes, a stake in the. Yeah, I agree. In fact, years ago, I still don't know the economics about imposing a minimum wage, but I thought, okay, let's just take the components example, or argument at face value, and say that it would cause negative economic, consequences. All right, fine. But if those of us who have more than we need would share it, or if you have a card that you don't need anymore, or you want to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff that you're not going to use anymore, give it to people and say, I appreciate you. This is it to augment the piddly salary you get paid in your job or something like that. Just something to show them that I value your contribution.
The distance between the top 2% wealth holders compared to the rest of us is astronomical.
I know, but at least we can, all of us near the bottom can share in it and be united, or at least recognize that we're all part of the same team.
Absolutely, and I think if we did unite, then we could demand that the wealthier pay a larger percentage.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot of the discontent that's been bred in this country in this election cycle and for the president. Unfortunately, we're still split along certain lines,
Think about this. Our country, we derive our power in two ways. We have the ballot, which is the vote, and that's our democracy. And we are a capitalistic society, so wealth brings power, okay? So that's a two-pronged attack, a way of having power. So if the wealthy have all the wealth, how do you get the other part? You keep us divided.
Yeah,
you keep
you have
us
to.
separated.
Saul Alinsky will say that very thing. He said the working people or the average people have two sources of power, or there are two sources of power: money or sheer numbers.
That's sheer numbers.
And we don't have the money, but we do have the sheer numbers. And of course, the way to approach that or fight it would be to keep us divided and fighting against each other. And boy, they've done that well.
They've done it well. They've done it well. We've had over 200 years of that.
Yes. Well, we have a little bit of time left. Kendall, do you have anything at all you wanted to ask? You've been awfully quiet this
Nothing
half hour.
I really wanted to ask. I'm actually soaking in the information, but I did find it interesting that you had brought up the labor progress helps not only black people but everybody, and that's something we had discussed last week on our show about with the labor unions. They said they don't work for just for the labor unions at the AFL-CIO. They work for all the working people, and I think people have to get that out of their mind, that they're working for one specific thing, and just kind of look at the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
and we aren't that different at all when it comes down to it.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Okay, you've been listening to A Pause for Thought. We have Bobby Thompson here. We've been talking about what a post-racial society would look like and race relations in America. I'd like to urge everyone to check out Dialogue on Race Louisiana, of which Bobby is a long-term 26-year facilitator. This is A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio, 96.9 FM in Baton Rouge. Have a good evening.